Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of AoS Close-Ups. This week we take a look at the brute battering rams of the Flesh Eater Courts, the Crypt Horrors. We'll take a look at their background, their rules, and finally their synergies and weaknesses. In the minds of these warriors, the king's first orders are traditionally theirs to heed. They are the king's finest, his knightly armored shock troops, and it is their well-earned right to engage the enemy first. At his command, they bravely gallop across the field of battle in a thunderous charge, while their fellow foot troops follow in their wake to strike at the enemy before they can recover. In an ugly reality, however, what the enemy sees is less grandiose and much more grotesque, as hulking, septic-clawed monstrosities hit their main battle lines, ripping out organs and limbs in one moment, and then gorging on their fleshy chunks in the next. All the while, enemy blades from the surviving comrades of the dismembered and disemboweled strike desperately at these preoccupied horrors, only to terrifyingly realize that these ravenous beasts are not only gifted with incredible strength and speed, but also with a supernatural regenerative power. These so-called armored knights are actually the Ghoul King's pale-fleshed Crypt Horrors. These abominations are created when a Ghoul King allows a ghoul's fetid mouth to sup the vampiric blood from his veins. Over time, the ghoul will swell in size to tower over his brothers and sisters. With this growth in strength and speed comes an unmatched resilience that is more than the ghoul's body can even withstand. The horror's body continually regenerates, bones and muscle never completely stopping in growth. As a result, its insides tear out of its flesh, their nails rip free of their fingers, and their teeth pull past their gums. Without the constant care of the court's abattoir of ghouls, the horror's body would consume itself, and therefore it is their task to harvest the bones from the knights to avoid this end. Among the horrors, the Crypt Haunter Courtier are those champions whose exploits have given cause for the king to allow his warrior to gulp his royal blood on repeated occasion. This honor often drives a horror's sanity to such a brink it actually brings it back to sanity, giving it a glimpse of its true nature. This often results in the creature tearing itself apart in self-loathing. But for those few that survive this transformation, they are reborn into brutal fighters that lead the king's knights into the fray, and one may even reach the rank of Lord Liverbelch, the master of banquets. When not leading his warriors into battle, it is the duty of the Lord Liverbelch to taste the dishes of the royal feast and present only the finest delicacies to the Ghoul King. Next, we're going to take a look at the rules, first with the Crypt Horrors, and then a little bit later we'll talk about the Courtier. We're going to attack the horrors along the lines of its strongest attributes first, and then kind of work our way down. But by no means are we going to be working our way down to its weaknesses, because to be fair, this army overall, this unit I should say overall, is very well rounded. It has a lot of things going for it, so there's really not too many weaknesses about this unit. So first up, we're going to discuss the movement. Now, the movement is very fast at 7 inches. However, it's only 1 inch faster than its 6-inch ghouls, which are the slower part of the army. And to be fair, that is kind of like a high-end movement rate for a lot of other factions out there. So whilst the extra inch is good, you're going to need it for a variety of situations I'm sure you can think of. It's not going to change the dynamic of the army. The role of the horrors isn't built on the fact that they're 1 inch faster than the ghouls. It's much more about other things that we'll get into later. Next we have bravery. Bravery's 10. That's the staple bravery across the entire faction. This means for this particular unit, you're going to have to lose 5 horrors before you even have to worry about rolling a 6 for your battle shock test. And at that point, your opponent just did 20 wounds to you. And I think you have a lot more to worry about than just rolling a 6 in this phase. If not, your unit's probably already dead. But if it's not, I don't think you're going to live long shortly afterwards. So, very tough unit. Each model, of course, has 4 wounds. We backed it up with a 5+ save, which is a good armor save. This unit is tough. It's not tanky, but it's tough. If you put it in cover, they're going to have a 50-50 chance of ignoring a lot of wounds out there. And when we add all this together, and we throw in one more ability called the Royal Blood ability, which allows them to heal up in each hero phase 1 wound for each model in the unit does get really tough, to the point that that it becomes a unit that your opponent has to do an all or nothing approach to. If they can't just kind of nickel and dime some damage here and there and then finish it off on their own terms. They need to concentrate, because if they leave just one wound on a minimum size unit of ghouls, or horrors I mean, they're going to just heal back up when it comes back to their turn. So they become tough because it forces your opponent to have to dedicate a certain amount of resources to them, and not just, they can't really just kind of, like I said, nickel and dime them when the opportunity arises. Now on offense, when we start talking about their rules and their base stats, that's when their role really starts to shine through. Let's first look at its attacks. It attacks with its talons or its bones, whatever it's armed with there. And these are 3 attacks at 1 inch range. They hit 50-50. They wound better than average at 3. They don't have any rend, but they do 2 damage. Their special rule Warrior Elite lets them, on a wound of a 6, increase that damage to 3. So these guys, maybe not the most accurate attacks, but every attack that's going to hit is going to count, especially against all those new units out there that are 2 wound models, like the Stormcast Liberators, those Prosecutors, Blood Warriors. A lot of those 2 wound models out there are kind of a 4-up armor save unit, and if they're caught out in the open against these guys, the horrors are going to be a good match for them. Now, when we talk about the synergy they get from Chosen of the King, they become a little bit unbelievable. Chosen of the King allows them to reroll all failed hit rolls while within 15 inches of a Ghoul King. That makes having any of those units I mentioned earlier out in the open a death sentence, in my opinion. And even if you put them in cover, I think that more times than not, unless that unit's also very offensive, the horrors might come out on top. And even if they don't come out on top, if they're charging you in cover, wow, they're gonna really dig you out. They're gonna, if anything, they're gonna out attrition you to a point that any follow-up units that they have are gonna probably wipe out the rest of whatever was left in cover. The thing here is, if you're being charged by these guys and not getting a charge off them, you're in a load of hurt. So we'll go ahead and move on to the Courtier, which the stats are pretty much the same. The changes are the wounds and the save. He's tougher. He gets 6 wounds. His save is up to a 4. He becomes a good matchup against a lot of other heroes out there. Of course, not a lot of the killer heroes, but a lot of those maybe close combat heroes that are still on foot. He's more than a match for them. He has 5 attacks, 3 of them hit on 4s, wound on 3s, and do 3 damage each. And then the other 2 do the same, except they do 1 damage each. So he's fairly tough. He has a decent amount of combat inherently. He'll be a good matchup for a lot of things, like maybe the Aspiring Deathbringer, and many of the Stormcast heroes that are out there, and probably a lot of the many other characters that we've seen so far that are not like monster characters, I should say. On defense, he also has Noble Blood, but since he's only 1 model, he's only ever going to heal 1 wound each phase. But having that ability on a 4-up, 6-wound creature makes him more than durable. He also gets the Chosen of the King, which just means that he becomes even more effective if he gets into those combats against other heroes. And then, of course, he has the best ability of the bunch, and that's Muster the King's Chosen. Now, this is a theme throughout all the Flesh Eater Court's army. In this particular case, you roll 6 dice, and on a 5 or better, you can add 1 model to a Crypt Horror unit within 10 inches. So this makes him very scary. An army that has a lot of Crypt Horrors are going to benefit greatly from him. Of course, it is only 1/3 a chance, but there's going to be very scary in those games where he might roll 3 or 4 dice with a 5 or better, and that can change a lot on the board. So from here, we're done talking about the rules. We'll talk about their synergies and their weaknesses in the next section. So in this section, I kind of want to tackle this in a way both from an opponent's view and a player's view. And first, I'm going to highlight some of the things I may have touched on. So first up is that the unit is tough. It's tough in the way that means you can't casually target them to make them ineffective. And it's not a good approach with all their rules, the amount of wounds they have, the armor save, the fact they heal up 1 wound per model. Casually targeting them, nickeling and diming them is going to leave you nowhere. It's just going to be a waste of resources. You're going to have to concentrate. And of course, it's still a bad, it's a no-win situation, because when you concentrate, more times than not, you're going to have to expend an excessive amount of resources that you wish you could kind of spread out a little bit more to get rid of them. Especially if there's a courtier nearby, because any model you do end up killing, there's always the danger that he's going to bring back more. And of course, if you don't concentrate them all, he's going to bring in some more, depending on if you're playing with the new comp or not. So you do have to concentrate on them. That makes them tough in the fact that you have to have so many resources dedicated to them, and the fact that they're also protecting the rest of their army as you're trying to get rid of this one unit. Now, saying that, there are units out there that are not good matchups for them. There are many units out there that hit on 3s and wound on 3s. It might have like a -1 rend. The first one that comes to mind, I think, are Storm Vermin. If you get charged by Storm Vermin, the ghouls are going to the horrors are going to fail. If you charge a particularly large unit of Storm Vermin, your horrors are going to fall again. So you have to kind of measure what you see on the table, decide what you need to throw some ghouls into first to kind of whittle them down before you send the horrors. The horrors are not the answer to everything. Another thing to keep in mind, to be aware of as you're playing, is the synergy that makes this army very strong at offense. A lot of things out there allow them to reroll failed hits. For the horrors in particular, it's all failed hits, so be aware of your bubbles. And as an opponent, try to think of ways to kind of break these bubbles apart to pull them away, because a unit of horrors are good, but they're not as killer when they're not within range of a Ghoul King. So there's something much more manageable that you can handle if they're not rerolling all their hits. Now, when it comes to courtiers, on paper, they're very intimidating. The idea that these guys are tougher than the ghouls, and the fact that they have a lot of synergy, it can seem a little bit frustrating and daunting to kind of attack this type of this army. But there's a couple things to bear in mind. One, there's a lot of approaches to kind of undermine this. One is to pull people out of their bubble. The other is assassination. Just kill off the courtier, dedicate enough resources to get rid of him. It's one less thing to worry about. He's tough, but he's not a tank. The other is kill off the whole unit of horrors. If your opponent has one unit of horrors, if you knock out the horrors, then this guy's purpose is now regulated to just another beat stick. He can't just bring on horrors on the board. There has to be an already existing unit of horrors for it to even matter. And the second is to not overreact. It is only on a 5-up. Now, there's always the chance he might roll a game where he gets all 6 dice being 5s or better. But there might be a lot of games out there where he's not going to be rolling a 5 to save his life. So even though he's intimidating, just remember there's lots of approaches when it comes to him if you want to undermine him. And that will conclude this episode of AoS Close-Ups. Please like and subscribe. Feel free to comment below about what unit you'd like to see next. And thank you for watching.